parents, my mom says, the right thing. She tells me she loves me. She cries. My dad says nothing. Next morning, my dad walks into the kitchen. He's eating some cereal and he says to me, I thought I was gay once too.
Mm.
I was like, what are you talking about, Dad? And he said, well, I did, but you make choices in your life, and I chose to marry your mom. And he walked out of the house, and he went off to work. And that for me, Diane, was this really pivotal moment in my family because I realized, oh gosh, I think Dad might be gay. But it took my dad another 3 years to realize that not only was he gay, but he was going to have to act on that. He was going to have to find a way to express that in his identity.
Well, he didn't
Um,
choose to come out so much as he was outed by your sister, correct?
yeah, that's exactly right. My sister, who was then in college, middle child in our family, she was on an early chat application, an application called ICQ. She was chatting with her boyfriend from college, and up popped an unfamiliar name. And my sister realized that my father had been engaged in relationships, other than the one to my mother, with guys. And so she kind of uncloaked my father, as it were. And at first, my father tried to stuff the genie of his identity back into the bottle and just like keep everything the same. But of course, nothing could stay the same. And as a result, he came out of the closet. He and my mother started a very long process of reestablishing their relationship, otherwise known as divorcing.
Mm-hmm.
And in the midst of that, my sister comes out as bisexual. My brother comes out as transgender. And my mom, through all of this, she finds the courage to call herself a survivor of a series of crimes that were so heinous that I actually had to go very slow in even learning about them. And at first, and certainly when it was happening, Diane, I thought that these were totally different experiences for everybody. But with the long sweep of history and with the ability to look back 20 years into the past, as I started writing this memoir in 2020, I realized that actually this process of coming out, though it had a different expression for each of us, was actually a fairly similar process, if that makes sense.
Well, it's become so politicized, sexual identity, especially I think about your brother and transgender rights and such. And let me start with the fact, do you equate, your mother's experience as a PTSD experience? Would you put the experience of you and your other family members in the same bucket looking back, or is it very different?
I mean, each of us had a very different experience, but I think that there is something very common to the experience of coming out. And I think that we all have to come out about all kinds of things in our lives. The LGBTQI community has adopted that term to describe the process of reckoning with one's sexual identity, but it doesn't belong to us alone. I tend to think, Diane, that we're all born into a set of expectations that aren't in alignment with who we are. Usually I think this happens out of love for the most
Mm-hmm.
part, right? Like, your baby arrives and your parents look at the baby and they start to dream of who the baby gets to be. And our communities have ideas about who will be, and our religious communities, our geographic communities. And then inevitably we grow in the world and we're not that person. And I think of any time that we can speak our truth, especially when it is in misalignment with the truths of our communities, that is the process of coming out. So for my mom, in one way, coming out was coming out as a survivor. For me, one of the many things I've come out as is a lesbian woman, but it's just one of the ways that I have come out.